This is from a mother who has been practicing real love for several years. She says, talking about her daughter, who is, I lose track of people's kids' ages. I'm going to guess 15. She said, Sylvia and I started reading Real Love and Parenting. I had suggested that some time ago. And so far, we just read the introduction and the first few pages. Her attitude was pretty good. Now, let me tell you, if you read Real Love and Parenting with your kid, it's possibly the most important single thing you'll do. They learn algebra and geometry and everything else, and they don't learn life. And that's what's in Real Love and Parenting. Living. I can't count the kids who are in their 20s and 30s now that I meet who have no clue how to live. They don't know what's acceptable behavior. They don't know what's social. They don't know how to connect with people. Pretty much they don't know anything. They can pass a few tests so that they can continue in school, but they don't know what they want to do with that either. So reading the parenting book with your kids, that's not an option. They don't get an option whether to go to school when they're 15. Well, why should they get an option to do this? It's that important. But I tell parents, if you tell them you're going to read the book with them, you don't have any attitude. Good teachers don't allow any attitude in their classrooms when they're teaching something. And good parents don't allow attitude when we're studying the course of living life. It's too important. So if a kid gives you an attitude like, we're going to read the book again. Yes, we are, except now you're going to do it without the use of your phone. Well, and I guess tonight you'll want to go to bed at 8:30 instead of 9. Oh, that's no 8 if you'd like. You just keep going until they catch on you're not joking. It just doesn't take that long. It's consistency. It's not harshness. So back to the mother. Sylvia and I are reading the first part of the parenting book, and her attitude was pretty good. And after I read this part, as quote, as our children become older, they exhibit additional disturbing behaviors. They become angry and rebellious. They sulk, avoid us, use alcohol, drugs, and sex. And end quote. And the mother said, I stopped to ask her if she knows which one of those she does the most, because this particular kid is really fond of one of those. And the kid said, oh, for sure the sex, 24/7. Now, this might sound snotty, but she was actually lighthearted about it, which, let me tell you, when you're talking about serious stuff, is really, really good that the kid would do this. Just making sure my light's on. Yep. It was cool. She wasn't resisting. She was playing with me, with her attitude, which is pretty good when a child genuinely plays with a parent. And I said, oh, well, yeah, of course. But no, you're all about the avoidance. Perfect. You didn't make a deal of it. You didn't say, we're not going to make jokes here when we're talking about life. That's okay. But she did need to hear from you that it's about the avoidance. And then she immediately slid off my bed and did backward somersaults out the door. And I said, like that. It was fun. And bless your heart, she learned the lesson. You taught her the lesson. You didn't have to pound it into her head with a stake. She had fun. You had fun. It was perfect. Then later in the night, I saw something that she had retweeted. I must be forgiven for not knowing what that is, but I think that means passing on a tweet that you've gotten from somebody else. And I get notification of all of her tweets, which, as a parent of a child under 18, if you don't have absolutely, completely free access to all their social media, It's like you're begging for trouble. The retweet was a picture of a girl that Sylvia knows who is simply posting a selfie. But considerable cleavage was showing in the picture, and the girl is 15 years old. This is normal for kids now to do this. Normal means of the norm, average. It doesn't mean healthy. It's normal. And if you ask 10 girls in a row to look at a picture of somebody like that who's showing her cleavage in a picture and say, so what do you think of this picture? Oh, 9 out of 10 will use some version of the word, that's so cute. It just looks so good on her. So the mother says, I walked in a room and I said, hey, the picture you just retweeted, you need to take it down. I know you see pictures like this all the time of your friends. In fact, probably most of them. And they'd all tell you that it's just a harmless selfie. But the whole purpose of her posting that picture is to sell sex, believe it or not. What this picture says to a boy is, I am more than willing to be used for sex. Oh, hallelujah. Straight to the Parenting Hall of Fame. I'm not kidding, because that is precisely what boys are thinking. There is no boy who sees parts of a girl's breasts who says, oh, you know, that's just so darling. Or, you know, that's just so geometrically symmetric. Never. I was a 15-year-old boy, and I've heard uncounted 15-year-old boys describe their opinions of such pictures, and they never say the word cute, ever. Not once in all of my years of being alive. The mother says, I was a bit tired when I said all this, especially when I said, I don't think parents have any idea what they are allowing with these pictures. These girls are not the slutty girls of the town or school. I promise they're not. I know them. They belong to families where one of the parents is very involved. At least both parents generally have upper middle class jobs, and yet these types of pictures are the social norm, which is precisely the danger. When what is wrong, when what is dangerous becomes accepted as normal, you've got a really serious problem, because young kids are just learning what is acceptable, what is moral, what is right and wrong. And so when you say to them, this would be an example of something that's dangerous, the first thing they're going to do is point to the first 100 pictures of their friends that come up on the internet, and they can find something wrong with half of them. The mother says, and the coolest part of the day yesterday was that for about an hour or so, Sylvia just talked to me. This is a miracle between a 15-year-old girl and her mother, especially when her mother is telling her what is appropriate to wear and appropriate to have on her website. She talked to me lightly, happily, without a heavy tone. She talked about Spanish and her high school schedule and soccer and what she liked at camp in the 5th grade, and how she likes the excitement of, doing new things and climbing trees. She talked about her. It was such a gift. And frankly, I'm deeply touched. All of you parents out there who are wondering, how do you raise a happy child like this? If you hold the line on what is right and wrong, and if you're not afraid of your child's disapproval, and you teach them lightly but firmly, your children will love to be around you. They will feel your love. And like I said to the mother, this is all you, kids. She was feeling like you actually care about her. That's why she talked to you. Here's somebody who says, what is the difference between something that is too heavy a weight to carry emotionally and too likely to be distracting or cause injury versus something that we're just seeing from a wrong judgment. How would you know? I'll give you a couple of examples and then a more reliable tool. An example of a wrong judgment. Oh, I just can't do anything right. Versus, that's a wrong judgment. Versus, you know, I've been making decisions all day long and I'm just too tired to do this. That's an example of a correct perception and just perceiving that anything extra would be too heavy a weight. But early on, you're going to have a really difficult time knowing the difference between whether the task you're about to do is too heavy or your perspective is wrong. And that is where you use a wise person. You describe the situation and they should be able to tell you the difference. That's one of the basic skills of a wise person. Here's somebody who says, I'm struggling between being a good listener and determining when I get to be myself and participate in a casual conversation. Sometimes I get excited and I interrupt or interject a question or a comment, and this can be problematic. Well, I know you. So overall, you and most of mankind interrupt too much. In fact, if you even think the word, am I interrupting? It's a 95% chance that you are interrupting, or it wouldn't have occurred to you. The real question is, why not wait till the other person is done? Is there anybody in the room, short of there's arterial bleeding and they're having a casual debate about whether it's venous or arterial, short of that, when does your opinion really have to be expressed in the middle of a discussion? Why? You can still talk, you can still be yourself, but you don't have to talk as soon or as much as you think. Being thoughtless and controlling and listening badly is not being yourself. Those are things we do when we're afraid that we're not worthwhile. And we're thoughtless and we listen badly and we interrupt and we talk a lot when we want to prove that we are worthwhile. Here's she continues, and she names a friend of hers. John doesn't like it when I interrupt him when he's speaking, and I get that. So we've agreed that if I pat his arm, it's an indication that I want to speak when he's telling a story or delivering a monologue. But this doesn't work if I don't realize it's a monologue, or like when we're on a phone call. Even in person, it often doesn't work because you have a tendency, as most people do who need attention, and that's most of us, and you're one of them, most of us would pat the person on the arm and we would say, well, we agreed on that signal. Turns out that even though you agreed on it, it tends to annoy the other person if they're in the middle of telling something that they want to finish. What in the world is wrong with letting the other person finish their story? Now, if they finish their story and they move on to another one, you can say, were you finished with the story about hitting the aardvark with your car and turning it into stew? Were you done with that story? Well, yeah. So you'd moved on to another one. Do you mind if I tell a story? That's an entirely different thing. But in the middle of them telling the story, they're the one that was there. They're the one that saw the aardvark. They're the one that made the stew. Do you really have anything that's especially important to add? On the whole, we really don't. I used to interrupt people's stories all the time, and now it doesn't matter. It's just not necessary. This is from a woman who whose husband wants nothing to do with her love, but he loves it that she has had an intervention and is so much more loving to him. She wrote, she said, I just had a really cool conversation with Norm, which is not his name. He started it with, Can I share something with you? Which it's a miracle right there that he would want to share something about himself. And he started talking about how he's always wanted all of his life. And this is a subject he's never talked about before. So this is very cool. All of his life, he said, he's wanted to feel, and he struggled for the word, and he said, I've always wanted to feel known. And the writer of this, his partner, his wife, said, in my mind, I thought known actually just means loved. Yeah, but see, to him, being mostly intellectually stuck in his head, known makes more sense. It is very close to loved. To him, it means being understood and accepted. You continue. So I kept using the word known in our conversation, knowing that in reality, it was almost certainly about his feeling loved. Honey, Hall of Fame moment again. This was very, very smart of you. And to everybody who's listening, this is brilliant to let him use his own word, his own definition. He has this phobia of the word love. And why wouldn't he? He's never had anybody in his life who's unconditionally loved him. And so to him, the word love is just filled with pollution, whereas the word known is much more understandable to him. If you had insisted on the use of the word love, you would have stopped this conversation and your connection. So it kind of underlines the importance of not having to be right. In this instance, you probably are right that it means loved, but you didn't need to insist on being right. That's beautiful. Norm talked about how he feels such a need for people to know him, know what he likes, know what he's good at. It was fascinating to listen to him. I mean, his heart was involved in this conversation. He said he thought that it all boils down to this. It all boils down to feeling known. I mean, this is like right out of the Real Love slogan, you know? If you're known, then nothing else matters. And if you're not known, nothing else is enough. I mean, the guy virtually said this. He is talking about feeling loved, but it's his word. It's a word that doesn't frighten him, whereas love does. He's had too many people in his life who have said, I love you, and it turned into just run over aardvark. I asked him if he wanted to know my experience. And he did. That alone is a miracle, which means that you haven't been correcting him and telling him what to do and changing his mind and contradicting him. So I shared about how I feel like you know me. She's talking about me now here because we know each other well. She said, I talked about how you know me so well. And the more I feel known, the less I care what other people think. Notice you didn't use the word loved. This is, and see, this isn't harder work. This isn't restraint. This isn't going, yes, I feel really good when I feel known too. Biting your tongue to keep from saying loved. No, it's being genuinely sensitive to somebody else's use of a word. He listened carefully to that, and he nodded his head, whereas he usually argues when I use the word love. He said it does feel good to remember that some people at work know what he loves and what he's good at. He even traced it back to his father, who didn't even go to the trouble to learn what his favorite subjects were in school, or even understand what his career was later in life when he finished graduate school. He got quiet for a bit and he said, every time I have felt this discomfort, or I guess you could call it pain, I mean, he's quoting from the first chapter of the Real Love book. It's really about when I didn't feel known. And I said, yeah, and it's particularly painful when you don't feel like your parents know you. because they're the ones who are supposed to know you best. And rather than have their usual argument over all of the things he doesn't believe about love, he just said, yeah, I think that's true. And I got to tell you, I am mightily impressed. He would never have had this conversation with you if you didn't have the love and confidence that you have now. You can't fake confidence. You can pretend that somebody loves you, but you can't fake confidence. You had so much confidence, you didn't give a hoot what word he used. And in fact, in your conversation, you continued to use his word, even though you know a better one. You didn't correct him, even subtly. It's beautiful. You continue. He came up with an example where his friend had said something that really didn't feel good to him. And he realized that it had to do with him feeling like his friend didn't know him at all. I shared with him about my first group that I attended, where I found a coach that I felt like could really see me and know me in a way that I had never felt or seen or known before. And even the bad stuff didn't bother her. It was just so cool that as each of us spoke, the other one just listened like every word was a pearl. Each of us felt like the other one wanted to know us. It was a powerful conversation. You add, and this is really quite something from this woman, because in the past she has been critical of the fact that Norm has been against or argued or thought about real love. She said, I think he's learning a lot more than I thought. And I gotta say, I'm kind of impressed too. She says, and I'm learning to talk to him in his language, learning to listen to him better, understand better what he's really talking about, feeling less of a need to make it about real love, but knowing in my heart that that's all it really is about. That sentence, it's always about real love, means more and more. Norm might not see this as learning about real love, but he's doing exactly that. It's beautiful to watch. He's taking me seriously. He's paying attention to me. And when I told him about how I would, that I was coaching another person, which is a pretty big step for me, in the past, he would definitely have made a comment about, well, you know, who are you that you think that you can coach another person? He didn't make a single demeaning comment. He sees that I have something to share, that I can do coaching, that I do have confidence, that it's not a crazy idea and feels good to me. I got to tell you, you have to know these two, but this is a world-shaking conversation. Just very cool. And it's because she's not fighting him, because she's actually loving him and accepting him where he is. Beautiful. Here's somebody today that says, new subject. So today I made the decision to increase my medication as told to by the doctor, knowing that it was, probably going to make me feel a little off, because when you change medication, you sometimes have side effects. Actually, you almost always have side effects. So I took it before I went to church. And during church, I was just not feeling that good. So I asked my husband, Ralph, we'll call him, if we could leave after church had been going for a little while. It wasn't done. And he agreed, but I could feel his hesitation and his irritation. This is a hard thing. We don't want to nag our partners, but you have to say something. Every time he does this, because he does it a lot, he was very likely raised in a family where there was very little tolerance for illness. I know many people who are raised in homes where if you were sick, there was something wrong with you. You hadn't taken care of your diet right. You hadn't exercised enough. You hadn't slept enough the night before. Parents who would come in after their child had been sick for an hour and said, "Are you still sick, after an hour. Kids who've never missed school their entire lives because they went to school throwing up. Uh, there are many families who, completely compatible with their intolerance for any kind of flaw or mistake, are intolerant of illness. You have to stop him and you have to say, listen, Ralph, look at me. I'm actually sick. I don't feel good. And you're being impatient with me because it inconveniences you. My sickness inconveniences you. And when you do that, you can keep doing it. I'm not telling you not to, but I don't exactly feel like a partner. I don't exactly feel valued as a person when my being sick is an annoyance to you. You've got to say that. You continue. I had to leave church several times to go to the bathroom and throw up before I finally left. And frankly, I wanted some sympathy from him. You're not going to hear me use this word very often, so listen carefully. You're actually entitled to it. Your partners, have him watch this video chat. He was being a jerk. I also wanted some sympathy from the other members who were at church. Well, you kind of don't get that because they're not your partners and they've got their own little kids to wrestle in church and their own little problems. And on the whole, we don't care all that much when other people are sick because we've got our own problems. But with your partner, you really have to bring it up because his being intolerant of you is really hurting your partnership a lot. This person says, I really appreciated hearing you answer my letter on the video chat. I don't remember which letter that was now. Since you answered it to me directly a while ago, I didn't expect that you would answer it on the chat. It was a nice surprise. You clearly know what my clients are like. And I still don't remember the letter, so I don't know what client she means. What you said about them wanting, this is a lady who's a social worker. What you said about my clients wanting a free everything free, food free, housing free, once people get on a roll of entitlement, then they expect to get everything free. They expect to be tucked into bed free. They expect a kiss on the cheek free. They expect to be gotten up in the morning. I'm really not making this up. They actually expect some of these agencies, if they're applying for jobs, to call them and wake them up in the morning to make sure that they're ready for the day. Entitlement is a just terrible disease. They can't help it. They're trained by the system to look for the easy way. Why are they trained by the system? Because in most cases, they will find it. If there's a loophole where they can get more, they get more. If they find that there's a way that if they tell just a little teeny lie, then they'll get double the benefits than if they don't, than if they tell the truth. So they tell a little teeny lie and they justify it that way. Once people start to be taken care of, instead of being made responsible for their own lives, the results are uniformly horrible. She continues, today a client called me. He was angry because I had not picked him up here's an example of what I'm talking about. I had not picked him up at 7:15 this morning to take him to sign for a free housing program. So he was mad at me because I didn't pick him up, which of course would have meant if she had to pick him up at 7:15, she would have had to have gotten there at 6:30, banged on the door till he woke up, helped him shower, made his breakfast, everything you can do to get him out of the house at 7:15. They expect you to do everything. So now he's homeless because he didn't make his appointment. He has no home. I reminded him that our agreement was not that I would pick him up at 7:15. It was that he would call me the day before to let me know where to pick him up on the morning that we agreed. And he didn't call. So I did not come. That's exactly the policy that I follow for making phone calls with people. If people don't call and arrange a phone call, I don't call them to arrange the phone call. If somebody's interested in changing, they will take the steps to do it. If you take the steps for them, this is the definition of enabling. If you do for people what they can either do themselves or be trained to do themselves, you're enabling them. You're making them weaker, more dependent, less happy, less responsible. Terrible condition to be in. In this guy's mind, it was your job to do everything for him. And it's because all of his life, everybody has. The parents, sometimes I want to stand in the middle of the city square and just scream and hope I get the attention of a few parents, because they're doing everything for their kids. Their kid leaves their homework home, so what does the kid do? Calls home and the parents take the homework to the school. This is how you train a child to be homeless. If you want to train a child to be homeless, if you want to train a child to end up in a jail, which is where I visit people regularly, then you just keep doing things for them. And then eventually they do absolutely nothing, and then they feel entitled to everything, and then they start stealing things, and then they start breaking the law, and then they're in prison, and then the first thing they say is, well, it's unfair. I was treated unfairly. It's the first thing they say. And the first thing I say to them is, no, it's actually entirely fair. You are being rewarded exactly right for all the years that you took no responsibility for your life. Now, in part, that's really wrong on my part, because they're actually being rewarded for the lack of responsibility that their parents taught them. So, part right, mostly wrong on my part. You continue, the social worker. He got even angrier and said, well, I have all these phone numbers for him, and that he'd been calling everybody to track me down. So why couldn't I have, oh, no, sorry, I misunderstood him. He was saying that I have all these phone numbers for him and had been calling everybody to track him down before as part of my job. So why couldn't I have just called all those numbers to find out where to pick him up, or to come to his friend's apartment, or, just go to every random house in the entire city and knock on the door and ask if he was home or in the shower? This is where entitlement goes. No kidding. I'm not making this up. Why couldn't he have gone to his mother? Why couldn't she have gone to his mother's house? People who are entitled have no limit to what they expect of you to do. None. I've had people that have been in jail who, because I was their counselor, I was the only person who could visit them. And so they felt very lonely when I wasn't there. And I've explained to people that I would be out of town for the next week. And they'll call me in the middle of the week when I'm in wherever, California, Arizona, France, and wonder, well, how come I'm not there? Because they feel entitled to interrupt everyone and have everybody take care of their needs. The conversation continued like this until he finally hung up on me. I love it how entitled people end up blaming you. I kept thinking about what you would do and wanted to tell him I was going to get off the phone. He could call me back when he was calmer. I don't endure conversations like that for more than, about 10 seconds. Perfect. Nobody stops them and requires them to be responsible, but you can. And the sooner you do it, the less you have to listen to the whining. In fact, it's not intentional, but every single second you listen to a victim or an entitled person complain, they take it as that they have permission to whine and complain the next time. Remember that the next time it goes on and on and on. You taught them to do that, just as their parents taught them to be in the position they're in. The social worker continued, I think I stayed on the phone with him too long. Yeah, you probably did. In most social work jobs I've had, there's been an ethic of not working harder for the client than they are willing to work for themselves. Oh, thank goodness. I didn't think I'd ever live to hear that. That's beautiful. But these clients all have schizophrenia or related diagnoses and are often incapable of thinking through things and learning a different way of functioning. But you have to remember that these people who are entitled are just as disabled as schizophrenic people. They really are. They cannot think clearly. So the social worker said, my questions are these. They must have learned to expect a free everything and for everybody to do things for them. So is it possible for them to learn to do things for themselves? Yes, it is possible, because I've done it myself on many, many occasions. You just have to have the guts to do it, because the first time that you tell them they have to do it themselves, they have a raging fit. They blame you, they get angry, they say you promised that you'd take care of me, you don't. They just go on and on until you give in, and then once again, you're part of the enabling teaching crowd, and you teach them to be entitled. So you have to have the guts to say no. The social worker says, I'm taking a training that says these illnesses are not psychosocial in origin. In other words, they're not a result of psychological factors or social factors. They are real medical illnesses with biological origins. While psychosocial events may trigger onset, these events do not cause the problems that these disabled people have. That debate's only been going on for 100 years. It is partly true. That's the problem, because there's 2% truth in that statement. People focus on that 2% to give these people an excuse. So, for example, there are kids who are born autistic or who within the first few years of life get autism. Now, at that point, if people loved and held them responsible, you can still teach them to be responsible. And that's definitely a medical problem. It has a biological origin. If you haven't seen the movie Temple Grandin, you've really got to do it. I mean, this girl, really early in life, you couldn't tell that there was something wrong with her. But by age 4, she was responding distinctly abnormally to her environment, despite the fact that she had a really demonstratedly normal, not just normal, a loving mother. A mother who kept loving her and holding her responsible for things, even though she was autistic and screamed and threw things and had fits. But because she loved and taught this kid turned out to be a PhD full professor in animal husbandry and lectures around the world in animal husbandry and autism. Most mental illness, write it down, it's a law. Most mental illness is a normal response to horrific environments. I'm not kidding. I've read several books now by experts in, say, attention deficit disorder. And they say that if you take all the symptoms for attention deficit disorder and you put next to it all the symptoms for kids who are just in pain, who have a toothache or a headache, or they're healing from whatever, they're just in some sort of physical pain, or their parents are getting divorced, or emotional or physical pain. The list of symptoms is the same. So their conclusion is that these are normal kids who are responding normally to environments that are intolerably painful. Either way, even if there is some biological component, and like I said, you can even treat the people that have biological components with loving and teaching. They all benefit from being loved and taught. So we're a society that has come to just love labeling things. ADD, ADHD, the lists go on and on. My particular favorite is ODD, odd, oppositional defiant disorder. when I was a kid, we called that a snotty, uncooperative kid. But it's now actually in the psychiatry and psychological handbooks as a disorder of the child, rather than the child having been really poorly taught by a couple of parents who were enablers and weak and unloving. The idea is to help them, says this social worker, to accept that they have a condition that they can't help. So see, you take people who are crippled by the way they were taught and you say, well, there's nothing you can do about it. Well, why don't you just soak their heads with gasoline and set them on fire? Because then it's not their fault. Then they can run around screaming with their hair on fire and go, help me, help me, help me. It's not my fault. So they're taught to accept that they have a condition they can't help. They teach them strategies for managing it. Do you think that quote is true? No. Do you think that they are teachable? Yes. How do I know? Because I've taught scores and scores of these people who have disorders. I've taught kids who are full-blown autistics and on the entire spectrum of drugs for their behavior. And once the parent learns to teach the child in a loving way, the autism as well as the alphabet soup of diagnoses vanishes. If they were real, they wouldn't disappear, but they do. The kids just need to be taught and loved. A lot of their behavior, says the social worker, really doesn't seem different to me from the behavior of other people who are just protecting themselves through attacking, manipulation, or in the case of one client who seems to have genius-level intelligence, staying on disability and hiding out in her grandma's house because she has extreme fear of people and their judgments of her. Exactly my point. We love to call them mentally ill. We love it because, see, then we don't really have to work to help them. You just put a label on them, just peel it right off a book and just put across there, mentally ill. And in fact, in many states, there's a diagnosis called seriously mentally ill, SMI. And once you're labeled as seriously mentally ill, then you can get free housing and free everything and free this and free that. And once they have the diagnosis, it's like everybody around them goes, oh, because now you don't have to do anything with them. You don't have to teach them. You don't have to rehabilitate them. You don't have to work with them. You just hand them vouchers and give them free housing, and then they destroy the housing, and so you give them new free housing, and it just goes on and on and on. There was a new subject, man and woman, who came for an intervention, and he was angry and right and critical all the time, and the whole family pretty much hated it, and it was pretty obvious that he was the primary problem because everybody pretty much agreed on it, and when I met him, it seemed pretty obvious that he was the primary problem. But then an amazing thing happened. You don't get to see this every day, so it was pretty remarkable. He listened. He thought he was about to lose his family if he kept it up, so he listened. He worked on it. He stopped himself when he was angry or wrong and remembered that he was loved and that everything would be fine. His wife continued to beat him up when he made mistakes, even when he caught them himself and described them. And he writes, and he says, life's very busy now. No, she writes, life is very busy, and I'm happy to finally take a moment to reflect on my victimhood. This is his wife. And to share with you that Daniel and I, her husband, are both feeling calmer and closer at the moment. I'm catching my victim thoughts early enough to then make a happier choice. Hallelujah. Excellent. And I'm going to help you with that by commenting on the following paragraph that you write. She continues. It happened last night when Daniel reacted quite irrationally, in my opinion, to something I said. That's a purely victim statement. You want to work on your victimhood. Well, you can't work on it till you see it, because you've labeled him as the problem by saying that he acts irrationally. It's only irrational to you. But your statement is pure victimhood. So see that and work on that first before you work on his being irrational. A non-victim would sound like this. Daniel said something that I just didn't understand. See the difference? He said something completely irrational, victim. He said something that I didn't understand or puzzled me. You saw it as a victim. I just saw it as an event. You said, I tried to help, but he wouldn't listen. That's what a victim says. A non-victim says, I tried to come to an understanding, but it didn't work. We just couldn't see the thing from the same perspective. Whereas you assume that it's always him who is at fault. You continue. So I left him to it. Victim statement. Because you're saying, well, I just left him in the room being crazy. I just left him to his own nuttiness. Then you said, even if the consequence wasn't what I wanted, it turned out that because I relaxed in the situation, we were able to enjoy the rest of the experience. And Daniel admitted that my suggestion was valid and that he could have listened to me better. Yes, and what you tend to do is take all that as justification of your victimhood. The truth is, he overcame your victimhood and listened anyway. You're both working at it. I'm not saying you're both not, but he simply disregarded your victimhood and practiced listening to you. You could have done all that much faster without your seeing it as a victim. I saw a new subject, a woman who had been in real love for a long time. She'd been through many coaches. No matter what she did, she had a hard time. She didn't fit in groups. She didn't follow directions well. It's usually true that if somebody is fighting one thing, they tend to fight everything. She was so very confused. I would characterize her in one word as lost. And she was about to give up. And she said, what can I do? What's wrong? Now, keep in mind, she's asking me this, so I'm not just offering my opinion out of the blue. And I said, listen to me really slowly. You are just really weird. Now, that could sound almost insulting. But see, in all of her life, nobody had ever told her that without being critical. You are just so weird. And then it comes across as another attack. I said, honey, you're just weird. If you take an average person, an average woman, you're outside the norm in almost every physical, mental, psychological category. You're just odd. So you can spend the rest of your life working with incredible frustration to be an average person, maybe, or you can just accept the fact that you're odd. I'm odd. I just don't mind. I'm weird. I just don't care. You can take your talents and be a great you. You're a miracle. You don't fit in your job, for example. Find a different job. Learn to be you in an environment where you are valued. So she did. She quit her job. She started looking for jobs. Within a few days, by the way, in those intervening days, she kept calling and saying, nobody's ever told me that I was weird before. I'm really liking this. I really like being just weird, not defective. She's just different. And she found a job. And she said, I cannot do this job. It's too far above me. I don't have the talent for it. I said, you've been told that all your life. So my question is, can you do half of what the job requires? She said, yeah, I can do half of it. I'm pretty easily, I can do half of it. Well, then take the job and use other people who know how to do the other half and let them show off by teaching you how to do it. She did it. She got the job. She didn't think she could do it. She wrote me the other day and she said, I blank, 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 love this job. She's never said that before in her life, ever. She said, it's hard, but I love this. Then she paused and she said, did I tell you I really love this? Really love this job? I feel like I'm growing up. I feel like I've finally found a place where who I am is being put to use, and I'm loving it. We spend our lives trying to be like other people. It doesn't work. We need to just accept that we are who we are, with our weirdnesses and our flaws and our mistakes and our peculiarities, and make use of them. This woman's happier than she's ever been in her entire life. I hear from her nearly every day and have for the longest time. And she revels, just delights in being odd, as are we all. Whether we're odd or not doesn't determine whether we're happy. What determines whether we're happy is whether we expose our oddness to other people and find people who can accept us. Then we trust that they accept us. Then we remember that they accept us. And then we do the best that we can to share the love that we feel and trust with the rest of the odd people who are around us. And all together, we can all be happy. It's a guarantee. We'll see you in a week.